Hello and welcome to Yodo. I'm Dr. Sarah Bohm. I'm going to provide information today and a few suggestions for family members and healthcare surrogates on how to bring up some difficult subjects. I want to offer some ideas of how you might open a dialogue with your loved one, and I'm going to suggest a few things to go over in the conversation. You may want to address the subject if you're seeing changes in your loved one or if you've become worried about a person's health. If you're the patient, it might be time to ask someone to be your surrogate. And I also want to touch on why it's so important to designate that healthcare surrogate. Many times, some of the issues that a patient can face are unique and puts the family and the healthcare surrogate in a difficult bind. Knowing what that patient's belief system is ahead of time can really help avert some issues. The question I get asked by families quite often is, how do I get them to talk about these things? I need information about what they want and who's going to speak up for them later. But I don't want to offend them either. They keep avoiding me. Many times it's difficult for that icebreaker. There are many different possibilities on how the conversation could be started. Each situation is different, but there are some common reasons that might initiate a conversation. If the person is quite ill or has advanced age, or you're seeing some decline. Many times the family living the closest might be the less likely ones to see those changes compared to someone who's just coming in for a visit, sort of the forest and the tree scenario. Second, a person might be having an increase in their need for help, or that there's signs that they're becoming frail, and it has the family worried because they don't want their loved one to have an injury. If the person lives far away from their loved ones, there's an added incentive to bring up this subject when you're in town. But much of the time, the dialogue needs to be open just for peace of mind. I'm a bit surprised when patients don't want to plan ahead because so many people emphasize that they want to maintain their control. In my video on Health by the Generation, it's apparent that independence and control are valued by each generation. Preparing for change ensures that the patient's choices and preferences are given the highest priority. It makes sense to not just wait and see what happens, as we do want to have things go our way, and this is something that's extremely important. We're planners, and for many people, it's really out of their character to not be prepared. I suspect for many that they avoid the entire line of thought as it is so uncomfortable for them. They're willing to ignore their own instincts because of that. Sometimes simply pointing out to them that they've always addressed issues timely and then reminding them that they are loved, respected, and valued can go a long way to helping break that ice. Reminding them that it's not like them to let things go, and you want to let them know that you see changes that maybe they don't, and you want to have it addressed timely. You might say something like, "You have taught me lessons and you've carried me through my life with those lessons. I want to make sure that I show you how much you mean to me by following the examples that you've set for me. I want to set some time aside for us to talk about things, and you can let me understand your priorities, and we can make some plans together for your future." A conversation trigger might include any one of these possibilities. If the person has serious illness, you might want to try to go with them to the physician's visit and ask for guidance there. A recent change in the person's health or someone else's health might be a trigger. If there's some change in the family status, maybe someone moved away or is getting ready to move away, maybe someone got married or possibly a job change, nearly any holiday, birthday, or anniversary could be used. Just start looking for a trigger to initiate the conversation. You don't want to bring that conversation up on that special day, but any one of those events could serve as a trigger. You might say something like, "Attending that birthday," or "planning this anniversary," or "unpacking holiday decorations got me to thinking." Maybe you saw a movie recently and triggered a memory, and that you might use that as the instigator for that conversation. So how you bring it up kind of depends on you and the person that you're worried about, and no one knows that person better than you do. If you're the patient and you have concerns about your own health, or maybe it's time for you to choose a surrogate, it might lead to awkward feelings and a sense of being a burden, or possibly that you might need to relinquish control at some point. Fear is another common concern I get when patients tell me they don't want to talk to their family. They fear change, loss of control, and loss of independence. I've had more people than I can count over the years tell me, "I don't fear being dead, but it's the time between my independence and being dead that really worries me. They don't like to talk about it, as they don't want anyone to think that they can't do it. And some are really concerned about a jinx. Many patients will tell their loved ones, "Oh, I'm fine. I can take care of myself. We're dealing with things okay, your mom and me." But that lack of planning now can result in putting everyone in a little bit of a jam when the evolution of change has finally reached that point where now we need help, but nothing has been prepared. We haven't taken advantage of the time that we were given to get prepared, and the help needed is right now. Regardless of which direction that this discussion is aimed, from the loved one to the patient or from the patient to their family, I advise you to communicate with the other party. Give them a warning blast, something simple and kind, yet direct, with that request that I think it's time for us to set time aside to talk about a special topic. Knowing the person well provides you valuable insight as to how to approach them. And if you're at the doctor's office, things might go pretty quickly and hopefully easily, but it may just be the beginning of the icebreaker, and you still may have a lot of homework ahead of you. Your healthcare provider should do a lot of the heavy lifting during the conversation, and then if things don't progress during the visit, they might tell you to go home and talk about some things and give you some extra work to do, and then a return visit is advised. It might be planning for the need for extra help. It might be about something even more difficult to discuss, such as end-of-life preferences. If a healthcare surrogate has not been named, that's probably first priority. When I'm involved, I like to provide some written information and ask the patient to think about some difficult topics. Many already know who they would trust to be their voice and stand up for their choices in difficult situations. Most of the time, patients have already got someone in mind, so completing that healthcare directive, that advanced directive paperwork, is not really a difficult process. Where I work, we request a first and second person to be named. We encourage patients to address this matter, and then we verify their choices at preset intervals. The patient can ask to update this information at any time as well. It doesn't have to come from the physician or the nurse practitioner, but anyone can initiate it. Procrastination adds to the burden of everyone, and it's nearly impossible to move forward with important planning if someone's dragging their heels. Having this completed and this advanced directive gone through is a tremendous advantage, because many of the questions that are asked on this document are difficult because they give typically different scenarios for the patient to consider, and it's usually guided by a professional. At our institution, it's guided by a licensed clinical social worker. We want the healthcare surrogate to be kept in the loop about the changes in the person's health, be aware of any increasing need for services, and be provided of updates in the patient's goals of care. These situations are fluid, and it's best for everyone involved to be flexible. Surrogates can listen in on visits with the healthcare provider by phone, as sometimes they can't come to every patient visit. You cannot hardly replace keeping everyone informed and on the same page. And for large families with one healthcare surrogate, I usually encourage for them to use a group text for important updates, because the healthcare provider is only going to be talking to the patient and one other representative. We just can't call that many family members back. Healthcare changes seem to come at inopportune times, and often they're unpredictable. It's very stressful for the patient, and sometimes that slow creep of change, what I call the evolution of our health, can kind of sneak up on us until it reaches this point of T-max, so to speak, where now we have reached a point where decompensation is going to occur. Next, let's talk about a scenario of the adult child caring for a parent. This is one of the more common scenarios that I may deal with on a daily basis. The conversation might go something like, "Mom, I've been talking with a friend at work that is having some concerns about their parents' health, and I realize we've not really addressed some of the things that they're going through. I'd like to talk with you now so we can have time later to deal with these things. You're important to me, and I want to be there for you. I want to set some time aside for this important conversation because I respect you, and I want to ensure that we're all prepared for the future." Once everyone is agreeable and a time is set, put some thought into the atmosphere. It should be comfortable for you and for the other person or people that are involved. They shouldn't feel like they're being attacked. The conversation could be face-to-face in a home, or it could be in a doctor's office. It could be by a video call. If you have a healthcare provider to assist guide the conversation, it really does help, but it's not required. You'll want to introduce the discussion and set some ground rules. For some, the conversations are quick and direct because sometimes people already know. For others, there's a lot to talk about, and the patient may not really know what they want because they've never really considered it before, or they had a less realistic idea of what healthcare can provide as disease advances. So sometimes the conversation has to be taken care of in different stages. It can't be completed in one sitting. If there's no time crunch, then you don't have to be pressed for time. You can say, hey, let's just talk about a few topics tonight, or we're just going to talk for 30 minutes tonight. But eventually you're going to want to learn the answers to many questions. And hopefully they don't all need to be completed during that first conversation. And I can get into the who and the what here in just a minute. For a person that's married, you might be surprised to learn that it's not uncommon at all for patients to not select a spouse. As many spouses trust each other and have spent many years together, it seems like that would be the natural choice. However, for many reasons, selecting the spouse is not always the case. Under a lot of circumstances, it may be appropriate to select someone else, and I'll give you just a few examples of that. Possibly the age of both individuals is quite advanced. Possibly they both have advanced disease stages. Sometimes one spouse has cognitive impairment issues. For others, the spouse doesn't want that responsibility. They feel like it's just too uncomfortable. We've talked in other videos that it's emotionally stressful to be the person with the responsibility to speak up for a loved one, to be that surrogate. And spouses sometimes don't feel like they can withstand that stress while they're watching their loved one go through a health crisis. Knowing that you're the voice and not the actual decision maker can help, but it doesn't remove all that burden that's involved. I've had so many spouses tell me, I know what they want, but I can't say it. I can't live without them. That's really distressing for me to hear. An even more upsetting statement is when I've been told, I can't let them go. They need to live for me. Even if it's on a machine and they are never able to speak to me or come home again, I believe that they can hear me and they would not mind to live like this. I don't know that that's what the patient would say. I know that's what the spouse is saying, but I need to know what the patient would say. A different example is when the patient and spouse don't share the same views on suffering or care at the end of life. Maybe the spouse has had a very different life journey. And we see that a lot with our veterans. Spouses are often very unaware of the secret burdens that the patient has carried since their military experience. Sometimes spouses are legally married, but estranged and separated, but not legally separated. It becomes really important that the patient has the one who knows them best and will represent their wishes, be the one that's chosen to step forward and say what the patient would want. This is the patient's journey, and the patient should get to choose. No one knows what they feel like inside, and we must respect their wishes, so it's really important that those wishes be known. The surrogate is to tell the physician and the medical team what the patient would want. The surrogate needs to understand the patient's perspective to be able to do that. One of the questions I have patients answer is, think about where that line is. Is there a difference between living and being kept alive? And let's go from there. The trusted person might be a spouse, an adult child, a nephew, a niece, a cousin, a neighbor, or a friend. Sometimes people are closer to their chosen family than they are to their biological one. Each situation can be very different. The healthcare surrogate becomes the voice of the patient when they become either unable or unwilling to make their own decisions. Sometimes patients no longer want the responsibility of deciding, and they may either ask a loved one for help, or they might even defer the entire decision to them. That's not uncommon. I once had a lady come into the office and she wanted me to talk to her entire family about a pacemaker defibrillator that the cardiologist wanted her to get. She didn't want to know the details of it, and she didn't want to know the implications, risks, benefits, outcomes. She wanted her family to know that, and she wanted her family to decide. She explained to me, I'm a tremendous worrier. Spouses may want to confer with each other or their adult children, or a trusted friend for insight, but they may want to retain their own ability to make decisions for as long as they can. The patient may be looking for acceptance of their choices. This can be a slippery slope to be on for both the patient and the loved one. If the patient is asking for your thoughts, don't add burden of judgment to their personal journey. They may have already suffered quite a bit from loss of function, or independence, or financially, or from pain, or possibly shortness of breath, and inadvertently saying things that would make them feel like you saw them as a quitter if they would elect comfort that may push them away from what their choice really is. That's not quitting to choose comfort. That's bravery to know that end of life is nearing and they want to face it. Supporting their decisions with simple statements and reminding them that this is your journey and I want you to have what you want. Open-ended questions are also a really good tactic. What's important for you? If you had to make a choice between function and being at home, what would you want? And why would you choose that? What do you want me to know? So there are a lot of open-ended questions that you can give them just because you're inquisitive. Almost think about it in a childlike respect. It'll just be these questions that you need answers to. One concern that we hear most often from patients is, when will this healthcare surrogate be asked what I would want? The surrogate becomes the voice of the patient when the patient no longer has the cognitive capacity for decisions. For some, the patient may have lost the capacity for complex medical decision making slowly, and for others, it might have been a quick change. Sometimes they will regain that capacity, and in other situations, the patient may have capacity for some decisions that maybe are a little bit more direct or simple, but yet not others that are more complex. Keep in mind that the healthcare capacity is not the same thing as competence. Competence is a money thing, and we healthcare folks stay out of that. Competence involves a judge and possibly mental health, but not generally me in palliative medicine. Complex medical decision-making capacity is a combination of 4 things. But in a nutshell, what we're looking at is appreciation, understanding, reasoning, and communication. Breaking that down just a little bit more means that the patient has the ability to appreciate the health situation that surrounds them. Second, they understand the information that's being given to them about the choices and outcomes that are available to them. Third, they have the ability for reasoning regarding risks and benefits of their various choices. And last, they have the ability to communicate those choices. This capacity evaluation is done if and when there is concern that the patient may need someone to assist them with making a complex medical decision. This sounds straightforward, and a lot of times it is. However, under some circumstances, patients may retain the capacity for some decisions, say to receive antibiotics for an infection, but may not have the capacity for another decision, such as accepting a complex, high-risk surgery. Therefore, lacking capacity regarding one specific health situation does not mean that a person lacks capacity for all other healthcare decisions. So it can get pretty sticky sometimes. Keep in mind that these are 4 key concepts to help us determine if the patient has the ability and the health literacy to process the necessary information for a complex medical decision. In another example, a patient with cognitive impairment may have the capacity to state who they trust to help them make decisions, but may not be able to understand that an offered intervention may result in a required indefinite dependence and the inherent implications of required ongoing treatment. If the patient and family have been proactive, made designations prior to the loss of capacity, it's a huge stress reliever, as one of those big hurdles has already been crossed. Let's talk a bit more about how to get someone to discuss their choices. Certainly, in some families, this is more easily addressed than in others. Some patients just know and they tell the family members that they've been chosen and they give them the guidance that they need. In other situations, it's assumed who that person would be, but not openly discussed to a place, and people are not really certain. As each state has its own laws about surrogacy, if you choose to Google and obtain a PDF form, they are available for you. It's not difficult and it should not be expensive. It's not a document that has any bearing on money or property or the person's financial estate, so in many states, they only require the 2 witnesses and no notary is needed. You can also check with your insurance company for advanced directive paperwork to name a surrogate. Those websites often contain that information. Another reliable source is the AARP website, and I'm going to link a few really good sites in the description box below. I encourage you to make the effort to choose your surrogate and complete the necessary paperwork in advance. In many states, for a patient that is not designated a choice, the order is going to be spouse, adult children, parents, then siblings. It's not always the same. Let me leave you with this comment. Please, please, please be prepared and designate your decision maker in advance. You can discuss choices, ensure that you've grasped the essence of their wishes, and provide them meaningful support and reassurance by communicating with the patient. It's not likely to be comfortable, but the ice must be broken. Periodically, you may want to discuss things to ensure that they feel the same way and you still have a good, clear understanding of what their wishes would be. When your loved one tells you their choices, you can ask a lot of open-ended questions that express your interest and willingness to learn, but you don't want to drown them either. You might say, help me understand so I know I have it right. Since there's no right or wrong choice, I want to make sure I know what matters to you. Let me restate what I think I hear you say, and you tell me if I'm right. That gives them some control. Remember, as a surrogate, your job is to be the person's voice when they're no longer able to defend their own choices, not able to choose what they would want for them, for themselves. This is their health and it's their choice. If you do accept to be the surrogate, comments might include, I'm honored that you would share this information with me and ask me to be there for you. I want to support you. Help me to know how. I'm capable of standing up for you and representing your wishes. I want to know more about your beliefs to ensure that I do what you want. Because you're important to me, I want to be as involved as you are comfortable with. So let's set up a time and talk some more. Other phrases that you might use could be, this is your journey and it's about what you want. I support your decisions. Our journey through life is very different for each one of us, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Other questions that you might ask may include, do you always want to know everything that there is that's happening with your health, or would there be a time when the burden of hearing would become too great? You will want to learn their thoughts and feelings about the 5 life-sustaining treatment choices, and if you're not familiar or they aren't, maybe you could watch that video and then the 5 wishes video together. The life-sustaining treatment choices are CPR, ventilators, artificial nutrition through permanent feeding tubes, dialysis, and transfusions. Gathering information and learning about their value system can actually deepen your relationship. You might ask what types of things they fear and what's suffering. What brings them joy? What do they see as a burden? Have a good understanding of at what point they would want to be supported through a natural death. Sometimes there are fears about how symptoms are going to be managed at the end of life, and that should be addressed with the person's doctor. You can ask the patient, what would a good day be like? What would a difficult day be like? How would they make a difficult day better? And what does the person think will matter most to them at the end of life? What type of environment would they want to be in, or possibly where would they want to be in those last few days of life? Is there special music or movies that they would want played when time is short? Would they want someone to be at their side? Would they want privacy? What about other people? Would they want visitors? What about information? Would they want the visitors to be given any information if they asked? What about restrictions? Is there information they don't want shared? Or is there people that they don't want visits from? Asking open-ended questions about what their wants are, what their fears are, what they see as a burden, how they view suffering is going to give you a lot of information, a lot of insight. Let's shift gears just a bit. If you're not sure about fulfilling the responsibility, you might say something like, I'm honored that you would want me to fill this role for you to be your surrogate. It's something I must think about, though, before I accept this honor. I cannot say yes until I think about it. Or you might say, gosh, that's an honor to be your surrogate. You are important to me, so I need to seriously consider this responsibility. I have to give it some deep thought, though. Then do think about it and let them know your decision. If you agree to be the surrogate, ensure that others know that you're the one that they have chosen, so later there's no bickering. I think it's best if the patient informs other parties of their choice. Remember, as money is not going to be a part of the responsibility for this healthcare surrogacy, generally there's no power struggle involved. If for any reason being the surrogate is not a responsibility that you can perform, be direct, honest, and upfront while remaining kind. You could say something like, I appreciate your confidence in me and our relationship. This, however, is a role for someone else, not for me. I'm not strong enough for this. This is not something that I'm able to do for you, and I'm sad to disappoint you, but you're going to need to choose someone else to be your surrogate. I'm very sorry. Additional topics that you may want to discuss will include other uncomfortable concerns. Depending on your relationship, you might need to talk about taboo topics such as funeral arrangements, picking out a casket, their eulogy. Have they prepared their will and estate? Some patients are going to verbalize thoughts out loud, but they're not really looking for input. So you need to clarify what they're wanting from you. They might just be bouncing things around in their own mind or out loud. And if they just want someone to listen to them, then you might offer to take some notes for them. In summary, being the healthcare surrogate is about telling the healthcare team what the patient would have wanted when that time comes and the patient can no longer interpret the information that's necessary to make decisions. When the person can't demonstrate those 4 components for capacity to make their wishes known, it's best to spend quality time with the patient to learn their belief system and priorities prior to that time. There's no possible way to know every decision, but if you understand the person's values about goals of care and quality of life, it's going to help you extrapolate what they would want. If you don't want that position of a healthcare surrogate, let your loved one know up front in a firm but compassionate way. Don't leave them hanging, as that can lead to them feeling alienated and abandoned. Clarify acceptable outcomes, and if there's a cutoff place for risks or benefits, chances, and probabilities, having an understanding of their value system and quality of life will serve you well to have that guide. If the patient is hospitalized and you need or want to have a conversation about those things, ask early in the hospitalization stay for a palliative medicine consult, because this service will guide the sensitive conversations and it's going to be less uncomfortable than doing it on your own. Many palliative care practices are available with outpatient visits. If you don't have a palliative medicine service in your area and you got to DIY the information, break the ice gently and tell them that you care about them and you want to address concern. Be gentle, as some people can feel attacked when they're not, and they can become defensive in just an instant. You might say, I don't want to offend you, but I have been doing some thinking and I want to set some time aside that we can have some important conversations about your health and planning. After what happened with, and you might name a coworker or their family member or a celebrity such as President Carter, you might say something like, I want to learn what you think about your health, and I want to know what's important to you. Before talking, set some ground rules for time and how to handle it if the conversation becomes too long or too uncomfortable for either one of you. You want to allow for a break, to allow everyone to have a little bit of time to consider the information. I will tell you there are times even when our well-trained team, and we do this every day on a daily basis, that we can't get a patient and family to come together. Those are the most distressing cases for everyone involved. The patient may be afraid, suspicious, or suffering. They might already be dependent on a long-term life support system and have a limited quality of life, and the stakes become very high pretty quickly. The family may be dealing with their own emotions, possibly guilt or anger, frustration, and fear, because they have their own regular daily lives that they're having to deal with while they're enduring these ongoing concerns for their loved one. Healthcare personnel also can feel emotions. We're human too. We have such tremendous technology, and although healthcare cannot stop death, we certainly can forestall it. Some people see that as a gift of time, and others find that it is prolonging the dying process itself. When cure is no longer possible, knowing what the patient finds as a good quality of life and understanding what burden and suffering means to them is crucial for the surrogate. This great question came from one of the viewers. I'm sorry I can't give more specific suggestions, but I hope this general information was helpful to get the conversation started. Please check some of the links in the description box below for more information. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate all your kind comments and these excellent questions. Bye now.